Hi, I'm Garbreak1, and this is Midgardia's Cool Crowdfunding Show. I'm here today with Benjamin. How's it going?
It's going good, Gar. Glad to be here.
Uh, so you're here to talk today about Adventures Await. So why don't you tell me a little bit about it?
So I've always been into D&D. When I was in about the fourth grade, my dad got me a set of the 3.5 core books, and I poured over them. I loved everything inside. I made a giant stack of characters, and I got a little upset because I didn't have anyone to play with. So I shifted kind of into the creation side of thing, more of the world building, and that kind of always stuck with me. So about a year ago, I started up my Patreon page, Adventures Await, and I decided to share some of those worlds and some of those creations with people on the internet, and it went surprisingly well. So after writing over 30 some odd adventures, I decided to really cherry pick my favorites out of that and put them together into one hardcover book that I could offer to my patrons, my fans, and have for myself, obviously. And that's kind of how the Kickstarter came about.
Cool. So are these is this a adventure series, or is it a bunch of disconnected one-shots, or what kind of thing we got here?
Really, it can be either or. If you play through all 16 adventures, they'll take you from first to 10th level. Alternatively, if you want, you can just slot them into your own campaigns wherever you like. They're really designed to be flexible like that. I do include some information regarding my world, Arden. So if you want to try and build around them as one giant thing, you can. There's a full world map inside, details of the different cities and kingdoms, kind of how the economies work. So it does give you the flexibility to say, this is all I've got is this one book. Let's see what I can do with it.
Right, so it's both an adventure compilation and a bit of a campaign setting guide, then.
Exactly.
Nice, nice. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the world of Arden?
So the world of Arden kind of sprung up from this desire to kind of cohesively tie together all of my adventures. I had settings and people who kept kind of popping up because they were useful and I liked them. Cities that became suddenly the setting for 5 or 6 different adventures. And I found myself needing to build out kind of a world around that. So Arden, as it stands, is mostly one giant connected continent. The northernmost reaches are known as Crescia. It is a merchant kingdom. It's essentially the resource-rich part of the world, and that's where a lot of the different races came together and built up their own city-states, mini capitals, as it were, throughout that area to capitalize on the wood, the fish, the ruins, the resources, everything that was available. No, just north of that is an isle called Frostmarch, which is essentially the land of the giants. Crescia kind of keeps them at bay, and that's sort of their justification to the rest of the continent for why everyone pays them so much money, is we're keeping the giants from invading. But Frostmarch is full of wild, untamed wilderness. There's plenty to be found. There's treasure to be gathered. There's wild animals that have special properties. So expeditions will pop out there from time to time and try and collect those. South of that is a kind of a Gobi desert-like region called the Empty Lands. It was scarred by a magical battle millennia ago, and ever since there hasn't been any kind of life or vegetation really growing. There's sporadic oases where nomadic tribes will set up shop, and there are 2 major cities built in old, basically ruins of battle citadels from that battle many, many millennia ago that are mainly underground, away from the hot, hot sun. And they act as basically stopping points between Crescia to the north and what's called the Greenwood to the south. The Greenwood being the majority of the continent. It consists of a massive forest on one side that's ruled by elves, a series of mountainous ranges ruled by the dwarves, and then a combination of kind of all of the biomes that's run by the races of men, your halflings, your gnomes, your half-elves, your humans. And then far to the south, there's the Wildlands. And the Wildlands are this jungle-esque dark region where all of the terrible things that go bump in the night essentially live. There's a very large mountain range that protects most of the continent from it, and then there are 3 entrances, one controlled by the dwarves, one by the elves, and one by the humans. And they're treated very much like the Wall from Game of Thrones. They're there to hold back the darkness. And there's a lot of cool adventures that I'm working on that are set off in the wildlands with great treasure and crazy monsters. But that's essentially Arden in a nutshell. It's one giant continent, very diverse, both racially and geographically. And I leave it open for lands beyond the endless sea. Other continents, very much like we have the New World here. England didn't know what we were, so there's always the option to expand beyond that down the road.
Right, and that makes it very easy to slot into a already made campaign world as well.
Exactly.
Just hope your players haven't sailed across that sea before, or if they have, just don't talk about it.
Exactly. It does say that some people have been over there, but it's very rare for them to return. So,
right. So what kind of genre are most of these adventures? Does it have more of a mystery bent, high adventure?
I really try and capitalize on the three pillars of role playing: social, combat, and exploration. So it does vary from adventure to adventure. I have some that are very combat heavy. It's, go here, kill the thing, get the treasure. One of mine that's going to be in this compilation as a stretch goal is called Curse of the Were-Giant, where essentially a giant contracts lycanthropy and starts storming about the mountainside, wiping out villages, leading a group of smaller werewolves and wolves, and you have to go find this thing and just murder it. And that's a very straightforward, no questions asked, you're just going to kill the monster. Where I also have one called Shipwreck of the Sea Method, where you're on board a ship when a terrible storm shipwrecks it on an island, and you have to scour about, find the supplies needed to fix your raft, and then get back out to sea and get rescued. Where there is some combat, but it's more skill challenge based. It's more social. It's designed to kind of mess with players who are used to just hitting it, bopping it on the nose, and saying, "Mission done."
Excellent. The Were-Giant one sounds awesome, by the way.
Thank you.
I take it as giant in all of its forms, with the lycanthropy.
Oh yeah, it's a Were-Giant. It is a Were-Giant in name and form. Take your giant, give him lycanthropy, keep him the same size, and watch him just rip through things.
Nice. You got like a 20-foot tall wolf ripping through the city. Yeah, that's good times. So what would you say you don't have to say which adventure it's in, but what's your favorite like big action moment? Unless it's the Were-Giant, which is totally understandable.
I would have to say, like, when it comes to my favorite moments in my adventures, one of them has to be the Tomb of Zentak. So the Tomb of Zentak was designed as my Tomb of Horrors. I wanted to make something that was unfair, had a lot of screw you moments. It was designed to mess with players that just kick down doors and walk through the dungeon expecting to survive. And there is a great moment where essentially you're going in to defeat a mummy lord, to save a local village from his curse. And you go through the entire process. You get through this dungeon. You finally find his secret room where he stashed himself away. And then you get promptly wrecked because you're level 7 and he's about a CR 13, 14, if I recall correctly. And it really comes down to the dice. The Mummy Lord is a glass cannon. If he goes first, he's going to ruin your day. If you can get the jump on him, or if you fully explored the tomb and collected certain treasures, you're going to have advantages over it. But the very first time the Mummy Lord busts out a legendary action and stuns everyone around him, or just walks up to someone and sucks the life out of them, basically, or casts one of his high level spells, it's just a great moment where people are like, "Oh crap, this is not what we expected."
It's so much worse than we expected from Wrath of the Mummy Lord. Even worse than that. That does sound like a ton of fun. So what's the price point looking like for the Kickstarter here?
So right now we're trying to offer the hardcover right around $35. I'm currently polling my patrons to kind of see what they would feel comfortable with. I'm also working with numerous vendors to figure out what they can offer me in terms of bulk pricing, if they can handle fulfillment for me, because I'd rather not ship 1,000 books to my third floor apartment and then have to hoof them off to the UPS store in batches. So, but we're looking for right around about a $35 price point for the book itself. The PDF's going to run about $20.
All right, yeah, and with the current was it 15 adventures, or so to like?
So the base book is 16. That's if we hit none of our stretch goals. If we max that out, I have 8 great stretch goals in place that bring that adventure count up to 40. And then it also brings in some great custom artwork by Daryl T. Jones, a phenomenal artist. He's going to do about 80 plus pieces for the book. And then if we get a little bit higher than that, I've got a series of magic item cards as well that are going to be provided digitally for all of the magic items I've created for the world of Arden that are in these adventures. And then lastly, I'm in the talks with a few different map makers right now that if we really get up there, they'll come in and actually redo all of my maps in one coherent, consistent style. Those will be both referenced in the book, and they'll also be provided digitally for people to use in VTT or to print at home.
Nice. I love a good map, personally. So, how'd you get into tabletop games?
So, like I said, when I was younger, my dad got me those books, and it sparked that interest in me that kind of stuck with me throughout my life. I've always been a video game guy. Like, I grew up on Legend of Zelda. That's literally half of how I learned how to read, was understanding those little prompts that would pop up, it's dangerous to go alone here, take this. And for me, I was always frustrated by the limitations of the games that were available to me at the time. So not being able to, blow up that wall or sneak past this guard or whatever I wanted to do because it just wasn't programmed into the game. So that's what I liked about tabletop gaming is you could come up with weird ways to do stuff and you were rewarded, you weren't punished. So I think I joined my first group in my first year of college. And we were a ragtag group of oddballs that somehow managed to survive the Tomb of Horrors and stop plagues and curses and slay dragons, and it was so much fun. And briefly after that, I got a chance to DM for our group, and that really turned the light on for me when it came to that love of creating worlds. Was I could sit down and I could power through an entire night busting out stat blocks and adventure hooks and magic items and monsters and everything and bring together this cohesive vision that my players would just really dive into and get excited about. I moved to Texas about 3 years ago. I'm originally from Massachusetts. And when I got here, I discovered the Adventure League, which was really cool because I was struggling down here to find consistent groups. So then I found myself DMing these one-shot modules, 3 to 4 times a week at my local comic book shop. And that pushed me down that road towards doing my own one-shots instead of these coherent campaigns because others could take that, drop it into their own world, or, if the DM just wants to play for once, one of those players can pick up one of these modules, slap it on the table, and have, 3 to 5 hours of fun.
Ah, yes, the eternal DMing curse. We are very familiar in these parts. That's fantastic though. I've never actually had the opportunity to play any of the Adventure League stuff, unfortunately. Should maybe after Corona.
Adventure League modules are well written. They've got some great authors behind them. My only gripe with Adventure League is it does restrict the DM in regards to what they can give and how they can run those particular adventures because they have to do it within the confines of that existing rule set. So the adventures themselves, running them on your own, I highly recommend. In the Adventure League setting, it just gets a little too restrictive for me when you have murder hobos who want to loot every corpse, and every corpse doesn't have money on it. You can't just hand it out left and right.
Yeah, and as a DM, I love to give out weird stuff and find like weird third-party content, and obviously that's not gonna fly.
Yeah.
So, which of these adventures are you most excited for players to experience?
That would definitely be the one called That Which Lurks Beneath. So it's essentially set in a ruined temple on an island just out on the edge of the sea. And players go in thinking they're going to fight some cultists or, defeat some weird mutated creatures, and eventually realize that the majority of this entire adventure takes place completely underwater. So it completely changes the combat mechanics, the spells people would use. There's a lot of verticality to the maps that people can explore. And the maps themselves are inspired by some great Dyson Logos maps that he did. So they've got a really great style to them. And the boss fight at the end, I won't ruin it, but is just a classic creature that, you don't see enough these days. And when you do, I don't think it's ever done justice. So Yeah, that which lurks beneath is going to be an exciting one to see people run.
Excellent. I really like a lot of verticality in maps, and that does certainly. It's hard. It's hard because like the base expectation is that kind of that grid style of play. So are the maps for that which lurks beneath? Was it that which lurks beneath? Right.
That which lurks beneath.
Okay, I'm Garnbreak One. I'm very good at English. Are they like a side view kind of like side scroller game map, or is it traditional battle maps interspersed with a like wider area map?
So they're traditional battle maps, but there's descriptions to each of the rooms that explain what your height and width and length of these rooms look like. So it gives it more of a 3D concept to it. So obviously, when you're fighting underwater, you can be above, you can be below. You know, you can swim beneath things, you can swim behind stuff. So you get a lot more freedom of movement in regards to how you can interact with your environment, and that's something I'm excited to see players leverage in their fight against the creatures beneath the waves.
Oh man, that'd be awesome in like Tabletop Simulator or something if you could just set things to float in particular places.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll have to do a one shot in Tabletop Simulator once this is out.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love that.
Um, yeah. So what? I assume that tabletop RPGs aren't your full time job at this point, as unfortunately for so many of us, they are not. So what kind of background are you coming from here?
So for many, many years, I was a retail warrior. Customer service was my forte. I eventually shifted over into marketing, which definitely is helping out with this entire Kickstarter process, getting it out in front of people. I spend my day on the phone, making phone calls, writing emails, responding to clients, basically putting out fires all day long. So it prepared me very well for this. I do run my Patreon page right now, patreon.com/adventuresawait. Shameless plug. And it's bringing in enough money that I'm almost there. If I get a little bit more, I'll be able to really focus on this full time. It will be a Spartan lifestyle, but well worth it. But yeah, for now, I'm the marketing guru at the company I'm at now. And as soon as I get home, I take off that hat, put on my writer hat, and dive back into the world of Dungeons and Dragons.
Is the dungeon writing hat a pointed wizard hat?
Oh, of course, with lightning bolts.
Nice, nice. It's the classic style. So I've got one last question for you. I see you have a ton of tabletop games back there. Which one's your favorite?
That's a hard question to ask. I suffer from the eternal curse of I buy lots of board games and then never find anyone to play them with. So right now, I would say it's probably Gloomhaven. I'm playing in a tabletop simulator game with some friends around the country. So we get together once a week and flip virtual cards and try not to die. And we're having a lot of fun with that. Growing up, my best friend and I, we ripped through all of Arkham Horror. That was a huge one for us. That was probably one of the first games we really dug into together, as well as Zombicide, which is a phenomenal game. Actually, I believe it's one of the first things I backed on Kickstarter. So,
if you look right behind me here, you can see a Zombicide board currently set up, which someday will actually get used. Someday. It's probably going to be in Tabletop Simulator instead, but It's a Dark Side Invader, I think. What that one is right behind me. Yeah. Um I gotta ask, since you are obviously very immersed in the D&D scene, how does Gloomhaven shake out compared to that?
Gloomhaven's a very interesting experience. It distills the combat pillar of Dungeons and Dragons really well. Exploration to an extent. There's no real social involved unless you're doing like the road events and the city events. So it's an interesting take on it. The fact that it was developed by really one person is really a marvel. The fact that he was able to build such a well-balanced game really blows my mind. But Gloomhaven for me is more about the tactics than anything else. I like sitting there looking through my options, planning out with my fellow players, like how are we going to handle this situation? Something that a lot of the time you don't see in Dungeons and Dragons when it comes to the pure combat, because everyone has their role. The fighter bops it on the nose, The cleric keeps everyone up. The wizard casts fireball until he has nothing else to cast, and then he just goes and screws off somewhere while the rest of the party finishes the fight. So with Gloomhaven, you get a lot more versatility to those characters. It's very much a throwback to 4th edition D&D, where everyone had very unique powers that had more effects than just I bop it on the nose. It was much more far-reaching than that. So it's almost a throwback to 4th edition in that regards.
And does that kind of like, well, all the board games that you've played and obviously enjoyed immensely, do those kind of feed back into your design sense for D&D itself?
Oh, sure. Everything I play, everything I touch, to some extent, feeds into that creative process. It's really about finding what's going to fit best. For me, my creative process is a little weird. I usually like to look through stock art and art that my artist friends have done and find a piece that inspires me, and I'll build a story in my head around that. From there, I'll design a map, and once the map's done, I'll basically write around those rooms and what I've done. So it's kind of a weird backwards way of designing, but it allows me to really kind of push the limits of what's normally seen in D&D by starting with a more broad stroke of what I'm looking to do, and then being able to refine it from there.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's kind of like the opposite of my workflow when I work on adventures. Although I haven't published any yet, so maybe I should try yours. But yeah, it's been a joy talking to you. There's gonna be a link to both the Kickstarter and the Patreon just below this video. So if you like what you see here, go back one or both. Oh, when does the Kickstarter go live? Because I believe it's not quite yet.
So right now we have the pre-launch page live. I advise everybody to go follow, keep track of it. You'll see when it goes officially launched. Right now we're still playing around with that a little bit. I'm still working with some vendors to get some finalized pricing. Until I have that, I don't want to launch something that's not 100% prepared. Been down that road before, and it didn't work out. So we're shooting for, at the very latest, the end of February.
All right. That's a pretty reasonable time frame. And yeah, if you like what you see here, go click that. Back the Patreon. Back my Patreon too, please. You don't have to if you're watching this. Don't worry. Fine. And
you do have to back mine, though.
Yeah, that's mandatory. Well, it's been a joy talking to you.
You too, Garb.
Yeah, and for those watching at home, have a good night.